Perfect. Okay, we're recording. And okay, so the purview of the discussion that I want to have centers around the idea of the masculinity crisis. And so, not necessarily asking the question, well, I won't say what questions I want to ask, but it's more so around the social implications and consequences and the causes around what appears to be a gender crisis specifically impacting men, right? And so I think that there is like a theoretical way to approach this conversation from existing gendered activist movements, like the various different waves of the feminist movement, and the kind of cyclical response that I think men have to that. I also think that there is like the individual. There's a lot of valid points being made here, and I'm not sure if the responses make sense to me. And so I also understand that even though I am a Black male, an identifiably Black male moving through life, I'm queer, so I have a different experience from the heteros, and also I am for the most part identifiably queer, especially like when I speak. So that creates a different experience about how I navigate education, how I navigate relationship, interpersonal relationships, the people I'm surrounded by. And I just want to make sure that I'm not missing any piece of this discourse. So that's why I brought you on. I'm also going to be speaking to Consciously because I think he's really well equipped to speak on it too.
He's well equipped. Yeah, definitely.
So the first, like the broad question.
I'm here to cape for the straights.
Well, yes.
Yes. Why would you do this to me, Irving?
Well, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it.
All right, it's all good. It's all good.
So, I mean, I guess the general question, right? The big macro question is, do you think there is a masculinity crisis or a gender crisis specifically impacting men and boys?
I think much of that so-called masculinity crisis, male loneliness crisis, etc., is cap. Just to be honest with you, the crisis is of late capitalism. The crisis is of social deterioration on numerous fronts, and patriarchy has a way of like redefining like big problems through, well, how is this affecting men? Specifically, what about white men? How are they doing? You know what I'm saying? Are they okay? Because if they're not okay, then something's wrong with society, And like, I have a video that God willing will drop by the time we finish talking about like the black man not going to college thing. And I get off a couple of shots at a little bit of everybody in that one because I was annoyed by it. But one point I make is that like black men don't go to college and people are like, well, what's wrong with black men? White men don't go to college and people are like, well, what's wrong with society? You know what I'm saying? The male loneliness epidemic thing, not the male, I'm sorry. For instance, like one thing I point out is the suicide rate has been higher for men since like the 90s, right? But what's driving that is white men. Like white men are driving the rise in the suicide rate. But nobody looks at that as like a specifically uniquely white male thing. It's just society has a problem. Right. And so I think this male crisis masculinity thing is an example of like us trying to turn away from like bigger, so it's like the opposite. Like we're turning away from bigger social structures that are very much causal to the problem in ways that people in power don't want to like address. And we're positioning it as a gender issue with the hope and belief that it will eventually turn into, well, women, the feminists, the gays, the transes, etc. And so are men going through it right now? Yes, but everybody's going through it. But nobody else has the power to make it a gendered problem like men do. Does that make sense? Like,
no, 100%.
Men have the capacity to say, well, this problem happening in society is really about me. You know what I'm saying? So
when you boil it down.
Right. When we boil it down, it's actually about me. And when we think about it, it's only my problem because y'all not doing what y'all supposed to be doing. And this is not to
Right.
undermine how bad things are in all these different ways, and like that there are uniquely important conversations to have with men and men about these issues. But the way that it's often utilized, and I would even say weaponized, is mostly cap, in my opinion. You know,
Right. I think and no one is shocked. I think we align on much of what you said. I think my biggest issue is not necessarily because I think that just as a source, like as a point of correction, which I happen to be doing this research right now, but the suicide rate for men has been up since the 50s, right?
mm-hmm.
And so we're looking at it a really long time where men's mental health is not adequately addressed by the mental health system, along with a bevy of other people. But when we're talking about specifically the types of people who are more likely to unalive themselves, likely as a result of depending on the kind of man, systemic pressures, homophobia,
Right.
poverty, being impoverished sucks, and it takes a big toll on the mental health.
Yes.
So there are a myriad of factors that don't exclusively affect men, but there's a specific consequence in terms of how these systems are impacting men that we have the data to see. This has been something that's been happening for quite some time, and I'm sure someone will be able to find some data that says this has been a phenomenon even before the 50s, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been something that has been an issue and deserves our attention for a long time. And I think as folks who say that we care about gender equality, gender equity, and just creating a system that really all values all people, and that's something that we should be interested in. Where my ears are raised and where I start to get a little concerned is when we frame it as a crisis, like a masculinity crisis, because
Right.
that means that it deserves immediate attention, and immediate attention from
All hands on deck. Everybody stop what they're doing. How are the men? Are you guys okay?
right.
Do
And in
you
relationship to who? In relationship to the other
right,
genders,
right.
that there's just so many other points of
Because
attack.
you made a good point. It's only straight men that we're actually talking about. We're not talking about queer men. We're not talking about trans men. We're talking about straight men. And for the most part, we're talking about straight white men, but black men are still included in that. I also want to throw out, I think I got this from Bellamy way back when, that the suicide thing also, like women, I think actually outnumber men in suicide attempts over this time frame. You see if that pops up in your notes or research somewhere. But that was like a point that often gets lost in the suicide rate conversation because it's so male centered. Is that one of the reasons why the men's suicide rate is so much higher than women's? Is because we're more efficient. We use guns as opposed to like pills, and so there's less room for error. So yeah, I just wanted to add
No,
that
I've
to it,
heard
like
that.
to further undermine that talking point that you'll hear certain dudes put out there. It's just not being like this. There's a problem here. We all agree on that. And that problem is maybe a crisis and it includes everyone. But the way people are trying to like galvanize it explicitly around men is insidious, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I think a lot
No,
of people that
no.
talk that game are not serious about really trying to address the problem.
I concur. I think just to finish my earlier point, I think the reason why I have an issue with calling it a crisis is not because it's something that doesn't deserve immediate attention, but when we call it a gendered crisis or a masculinity crisis, then you have to ask who is if it requires immediate attention and it's a gendered discussion, then that means that we may be focusing on something first or prioritizing a specific gender in terms of the ways in which, from my vantage point, white supremacist imperialist capitalist patriarchy is fucking everybody in the ass, right, with
Right.
no loop.
Right.
And so everybody has to we have to contend with that. I just don't know if I would say that there is a masculinity crisis. But here's what I'll also say. I think that a part of that, and this is like another like question I have, a part of that is, or a consequence of that, we see the rise of men's rights activists
Mm-hmm.
who do genuinely believe that men are systemically disadvantaged, and they advocate for changes in the legal, social, and economic structures to address that disenfranchisement.
Right.
So, I mean, it's kind of like I can gauge how you would respond to this, but do you think that that kind of ideological response is harmful, necessary in
It's
starting discourse?
it's challenging, right? I would never say disadvantaged. I think disenfranchised maybe works a little bit. I like to just say affected or negatively affected, right? There are systemic ways in which men are negatively affected by white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. The problem is that those effects, one, are just in general less dire and like vicious than the way it affects everyone who doesn't fit into that category. Two, the people that when people like so many people that want to get into those disaffectations, people that want to get in there and address it, the people that want to get in there and address it, it's hard to like not look at them sideways because every third person, um, 2 out of 3 people that saying they're in there to address the issue are not in there for the right reasons and are not addressing the right issue. And so it's like I want to get on board and like be a champion of people saying I want to support and help men in these ways, but like I have to go through all these checklists and all this evaluation before I can trust and get behind you, because I've seen that so many times before. And then you start hearing you hear niggas refer to women as females. I'm like,
yikes.
Yeah, you almost had me. You almost had me. You was close.
It stinks in here. It's so ghetto.
right. And then that causes a problem because now we have a problem that is there and it is relevant and it's affecting everybody, including the men. But the people who most need to activate to address the problem are not effective at it, even if they aren't insidiously trying to reinforce patriarchy. They don't know enough about how patriarchy works to not do it by accident. You know what I'm saying? Like, There's a lot of people I love. Like, I love either Keith Wilson or Kevin Wilson. I'm not familiar. I don't remember his brother. I never remember his brother's name. He's like an old, really masculine dude with a white beard. He does karate. It might be someone to like at least I spy to like as you get into like the masculinity crisis stuff, right?
Okay.
He's like, so I'm a fan overall, right? Because if there is a crisis in masculinity, the crisis is that the role model, like the role models and the ways in which so many men and boys are initially pointed at are horrible. Andrew Tate, Manosphere, Kevin Samuels, you know the routine. That's who takes up the most space for men's ideas online, offline, etc. Right? So if there's any crisis, I know we're going to get to Anthony Mackie. If there's one point I think he was trying to make, he was getting at that his problem with like the boys and men right now, the crisis was we're teaching men to be horrible people and calling it manhood, right? So the guy, Keith Wilson, is the opposite of that. He's very, very, we're going to have responsible discussions. We're going to get in touch with our emotions. We're going to teach a man how to be emotionally whole humans. We're not going to teach that violence and hyper masculinity and these things are the appropriate way for men and boys to act. And it's really, really good. However, it's still at its core it's still at its core a conservative, very binary response to gender and gender trouble for men and boys. It still kind of positions them to be this protect, provide, man of the house archetype, which like is still part of the same problem. It's not really like is there a healthier way to engage with that? Is that harm reduction? Yeah. Is it a solution? Not really. You know what I'm saying? Is it a long-term fix? Not really. And it allows for all those other doors to toxic stuff to stay open. I feel like I'm way off topic. The original question was like, what was the original question essentially?
No, I mean, I always can appreciate a detour. There is no topic. You're on topic.
Thank you.
But the original question was like the rise of men's rights act. Is that ideology harmful or necessary as a response?
So I guess the answer to that is it depends. The original men's rights movement, the mythopoetic men's movement, was low-key feminist. And it was men trying to align with like using the essentially the baseline frameworks of feminism to say, okay, how are these things affecting us? I hate that I have to like work like this and I'm missing out on access to like my children's lives. I hate that I don't have the capacity to like be an emotionally whole figure and that people expect me to be stoic all the time. I hate, all these pretty obvious things, right? And they were onto something for a second, and then the niggas showed up. Well, in this case, it was crackers, but then the people showed up and they were like, yeah, that's true. And it would fix this if women knew their place. And it's just impossible. And I don't know how. And I run into this both in terms of like my personal ability to toe that line, and also in like every once in a while, it will pop up that's like, I'm a big fan of yours, but why don't you talk about women more? And I'm like, why you want me to do that? You know what I'm saying?
So first of all, you said so much, and I do have a question that lives somewhere in the context of what you're saying, because one, you're using a lot, and this is no surprise. I'm a fan of your work, and we've had multiple conversations like this. So you're using a lot of feminist language to have this gendered conversation, right? And then you're talking about the lack of role models that young boys and and even males, adult males, have in terms of trying to identify not only what a real man is or what a real man does, but also just how to be a good human in a male body, right? And how to navigate the systems that impede your success, that create these kind of mental health, these poor mental health conditions, right? That a lot that we're talking about in the context of this conversation, experienced by males and boys, and then you also always talk about it from an intersectional framework, which is why, and this is not intended to be a gotcha moment, so you can tell me like how comfortable you feel about this, but it was why, like, when you said something once before, and I have the video, so we'll play it for you. You said something once before that alluded, and I'd love for you to expound, that alluded to the fact that alluded to why you don't call yourself a feminist. And then I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. Actually, I'm just gonna play the video.
It's
not
the whole
very long.
2000K. Oh, you went way back. No, go ahead.
No. I wouldn't do that. This is a recent video.
Okay.
So this is actually from your gender wars video, which I loved. I thought it was incredibly insightful for me as a person who, sits outside of the heteros. So let me play it.
I don't really refer to myself as a feminist, despite what my content tends to project to the world. And this is not because I have an aversion to feminist theory. I'm a person whose core readings in grad school all hinge around feminist gender studies. But it's because of that reading that I recognize that feminists and feminism are loaded terms for a man to describe himself as. And while I think men that call themselves feminists are probably mostly okay, men who promote themselves and monetize themselves as feminists are very much a mixed bag, and if I have to be honest, probably should not be trusted. So I just personally avoid that altogether and hope that my actions speak for me.
Period. Okay, the question is, first of all, I mean, much of that I get, especially the profiting piece, right? Anytime you put this in like a capitalist context, specific, it can give very like, are you a grifter? I'm not sure. But for me, what was a little like, this is a disheartening is I see too often the only male voices who are saying because your work is feminist. It is at its very core the ideological framework that we're having through which we're having this conversation and through which you disseminate much of your work is intersectional feminism. You understanding that you being Black and a male, and then your wife being a woman, and people who are queer and trans, all of those things interact with one another to create specific experiences that we have to have nuanced and complex conversations about. That's like what your work is. It is definitionally intersectional feminism. And the reason why I said it's a little disheartening is so often the people who take up space in this discourse are women or queer folks like myself, and we're not using the term, saying loudly, I am a feminist, as a masculine man like yourself, gives other folks permission, men specifically, hetero, mask-presenting men, permission to say, no, like I too am a feminist. And this is why. This is how I know that me saying I'm a feminist includes me in conversations around masculinity and stuff. So I was just kind of like, I understood to a point, but I guess I wanted to give you more space to, because that was all you said on it, to explain on that.
Yeah, it's really just a matter of being aware of the minefield of terminology. I tend not to call myself a leftist too, right? The minefield of what is added and like the risk and reward to that label. So what you just said is very true, right? Me calling myself a feminist as a traditionally masculine male, married to a Black woman, 2 little boys. I have all the things that the manosphere type cats say they want. They don't want that shit, but they say they want those things, right? That is the ideal. So calling myself a feminist would be a very powerful like statement in that regard. The flip side to me, and from my standpoint, is the framework and the concept of feminism is so ripe for distortion and extortion and grifting that I almost fear the ripple effect for other men, for other Black men. I've seen the Aziz Ansari's, right? I don't know if Louis C.K. ever like promoted that he was a feminist, but I think about like a lot of male figures. That video was about Derek Jackson,
Right?
You know, and so part of it is like, part of it is low key just marketing and branding. It's like I don't want to brand and market myself around the label, because the consequence of that is, one, giving power to the co-option of feminism, which has also happened. A lot of people co-opted feminism. Katy Perry and them just went to space. Look at that.
Girl.
Look at feminism.
Girl. Not girl you, but girl them.
Right.
Don't get me started on that bullshit.
Right. We just went to space, y'all. You know, but
girl, just a couple of multi-millionaires sent to space by one of the biggest billionaires on the planet. One small step for women.
Right. Right. So it's a universal issue about like high-minded radical ideas being branded and like how that has ripple effects. And also, I think the real core of your disappointment, which I have to just sit in, is I know if I call myself a feminist, certain niggas will not listen. They will not show up. They will not click. They will not pay attention. And I've been feeding niggas intersectional theory for 5 years to 1 million subscribers without saying, just feeding them the meat of it. You know what I mean? I've been giving them hot dogs without telling them how it's made, is my whole point. Right. And I just felt like by pulling the core values and the ideology into so much of my work without naming it, I'm being more useful, because at some point the behavior is going to be picked up, the attitude is going to be picked up, and some of the men that watch me are going to recognize that they identify with feminism and all these things without ever having employed the term, you know. And there is a failure of courage and maybe conviction on my part in that. Professor Odie called me out on that once. I don't know if you know about Professor Odie.
Oh, of course I do.
Yeah,
he has like an Allstate voice.
Right. Yeah. He called me out on that once because I did a podcast with the Waving the Red Flag dudes and pretty much gave the same spiel. And he was like, "No, call a thing and like plant the flag and let it be known." And like I cannot argue against why that's legit and why that's a legit criticism. And I have no response to it other than I think the thing I'm doing is better in the long run. I think the thing I'm doing is more useful. And I may feel differently in the future. Someone may point something out to me, be like, nigga, you thought, and I might have to change my mind completely. But thus far, I've felt pretty like strongly and been convinced by the progress that I've seen that has been the way to go because of, and so to bring it full circle, I made the joke I made with somebody about Anthony Mackie was that if Anthony Mackie was the worst we could do, was the worst it got, the world would be so much better. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah. No. Well,
and,
I'm not. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I operate. Well, that's the logic I'm operating on. If I can get everybody to start from where Anthony Mackie is, or maybe I don't. Maybe I have a better vision of Anthony Mackie than is fair. But my point, I guess, to get away from Anthony Mackie, if I can get it to the point where the baseline for folks is somewhat problematic, uninformed opinions, right? If I could get that to the baseline, we've had a whole lot of progress to get to that point.
Right.
And so I feel like what I do best is like raising the floor of things, and I submit to folks like you to be the people to like, okay, now let's reach for the ceiling. You know what I'm saying? Now let's break through the top to the top level. But yeah, and that's imperfect. That's imperfect. That's flawed, and I'll hold that.
No, yeah, we're all flawed. We're all fucked up, right? I think so I mean, I respect that response. I think it is a respectable response. Like even folks outside of myself who understand exactly what it is that you're trying to do, and everybody understands their purpose. Everybody can't be everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to me. I do what I receive from that is that there's a lot of risk associated with you saying that. Even so, but for myself, I try to use terms like I'm a practicing feminist, because there is a delicate balance of you being a business owner, you being a media figure, right? And you being a person who wants to make sure that your politic comes through, as like, this is your job, right? You're an employee, and you are going to get employee of the month. Sorry, that's a Coco Jones reference. And so yeah, I think that there's a responsibility to your work, and then you have the political piece that you want to intersect with your work. So I respect it. I think it is a difficult thing to do as anybody born in a male body, trying to represent themselves as a feminist, because there's also a standard with which we hold intersectional feminists that I know, me personally, I'm not certain that I'm always going to be able to live up to that. I'm not even certain if, like, I think that there are like the intersectional feminist framework is aspirational to me above all, right? Like, I think that level, what that work calls for us, right, or compels us to do, is to really unlearn all of the white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist patriarchy, or to do that to the best of our ability, and that's incredibly difficult. Especially because me personally, I'm a clown, so I'll be saying shit that's like, that was problematic, and I'm probably gonna.
But it was funny.
But it was funny,
and it was useful.
Right?
Yeah.
And entertainment value is also important. So anyway, I see the value in what you're doing. I also still hold the same criticism.
Shortcomings. You see that it's a half measure on some ends, and that I'm leaving.
Because this is what I want to say. Sorry, because there is so much power in you saying it, and that would be the consequence, right? That people may not, you lose a lot of people who listen to you, right? And that matters when you have a family to feed, right?
Right.
But so I don't think that's not important. That's not also important. But I think that feeding people, like being a covert feminist, and feeding people the ideology without naming it, doesn't do much to address the people who are still going to bastardize your talking points under a label that is harmful, right? So you may be very vehemently anti-manosphere, but people will use your talking points because you haven't said explicitly, this is the theory from which I am pulling this, right? I am an intersectional feminist. People will take your talking points and, like I said, bastardize them and make it seem like, oh, well, this aligns perfectly with the men's rights movement.
Right.
And so I think when you leave that level of ambiguity, it becomes a little difficult.
So I only have two disagreements there.
Okay.
The first one is, I don't think calling myself a feminist would actually be detrimental from a business standpoint and branding standpoint. I actually think it would probably help a little bit. just through the nature of, okay, we may close one door, but we open another. And like, just in terms of our general space, right? The space is dominated, like all the black men are under me and foreign men and Lil Bill. You know what I'm saying? And low-key, not even foreign men. Like foreign men's about half and half. He's got larger women's fan base and queer fan base than both me and Lil Bill. And so like, it would actually be, from my perspective, it would actually be beneficial to go more hard into that branding from an economic standpoint, which is another reason why I resist it, because I feel like that would be disingenuous. It's a you know, I just have ethical problems there. The other thing is, I forgot the other thing you had just said. What was the last thing you said?
The ambiguity.
The other thing is, I've come to believe, and this may be just be me coping on my own end, right? I open myself up to that critique, but I've come to believe that there's not much you could do to stop certain folks from bastardizing your words, right? Like, if I could call myself intersexual feminist and like preface that with everything I say, I can quote bell hooks in videos. Like, I got bell hooks quote coming in this next video, right? And I do all the time, and people will still, like, in the comment section be like, yeah, this is why black women such and such and such and such. Like, that shit just happens. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, I've kind of, you know, some of this is couched in the depersonalization that comes with clout and influencer status, where it takes conversations like this to, like, remind me of, like, the direct consequences of business decisions and branding decisions and messaging decisions. So, like, this is, again, me not directly rejecting this criticism. But I have come to, like, just wallow in a level of depersonalization that no matter what I say or do, certain people are going to be coming to my content and my message with their own agenda. And if they like me, they're going to use whatever I say to feed that agenda, even if it's something I would never draw myself into. The most I could do is be hostile to those audiences as much as possible. And even in doing that, they become anti-fans. You know what I'm saying? They become ironic consumers. You know what I'm saying? So, ironic, you know, consumers. So like and this is just me giving the context of the decision tree that I'm going through. But you're right. You know what I'm saying? But you're correct. You're correct. Right. At the end of the day, I'm leaving meat on the table that could be useful for other people to chew on, because it's better for my work. It's better for my job. It's better for my peace of mind. And it's imperfect and limited allyship on my behalf. And I should be called on that, like I'm being now. And I'll think about, like, where that goes. Like, maybe this goes back into the Beyonce video. I got to figure this shit out. That was 2.5 hours long. I don't know. Maybe when I get to the Kendrick Lamar part, I can throw some smoke at some people. We'll see.
We shall see. I look forward to it. Okay, so I do now comes the most anticipated part of the conversation. I feel like I do want to go ahead and play the Anthony Mackie piece, and then get your thoughts around that. Mm-hmm. So let me put
living through the death of the American.
This has to come down. This has to go up.
We've been living through the death of the American male. They have literally killed masculinity in our homes and our communities for one reason or another. But I raised my boys to be young men. And however you feel about that, you feel about that. Right. But my boys will always be respectful. They will always say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. No, sir, no, ma'am. They will always say thank you. They will always open a door for a lady. They will always make sure that their mother is taken care and provided for. They will always be men. And that's always since they were 2 years old. Every time I left for a job, I tell my 15-year-old, you're the man of the house. You make sure these doors are locked every night, this alarm is on, you text me or you call me every night before you go to bed and you wake up.
I love that.
Because we're men. If I'm not there to protect, he got to be there to protect. Because you can have all the money in the world, climb through the window, that money means nothing.
Right.
You can have all the celebrity in the world. You jump through the door, that celebrity means nothing. Yeah. So you got to have a little guard in there.
All right, that's enough of that.
I'm sitting here Googling Ryan Clark. Ryan Clark's such a messy bitch. He's so messy because he know what he be doing. Because he did this same shit with Simone Biles and
yes,
what's his name?
He's a professional actor because he's like, I'm confused. Well, go ahead.
Why are people angry about this? And I'm like, and I got in trouble over that too because I also felt much with this that the full context of the podcast and the conversation would maybe tamper down some of the response. It still has problems, but it becomes a discussion versus a reaction. If you don't bite off the most provocative rage baiting chunk and send it out to the people, be like, what y'all think about that? You know what he said?
You know this is clip culture. It's never going to be. It's always going to be a debate. Yeah, with clip culture.
But he's responsible. That's his short for his podcast that he put on his Instagram or TikTok page for this very reason. Because at the end of the day, he's more interested. And I guess this pot calling kettle black. He's more interested in what is this doing for my numbers than what is this doing to the people, right? So I want to start there about the rage bait of this. But then I have to critique what actually was said, because in context and out of context, there's a lot of problems with what Anthony Mackie just said. Right. Are they akin to Umar Johnson, Kevin Samuels? No. Should the response to that be a rage cycle? I would also argue no, but there should be a response. So do you want to just kind of break down my issues with it first, or like where you want to go with it? Because I
have a million. No, I do want to kind of direct your response a little bit. I do have a bunch of questions, but I know that you are a boy dad, and I have a father as well, who I grew up in the home with. I grew up with both my parents, and so this idea in particular, because I do have questions around the role of a father in the home, but specific to this clip, this idea around male children being protectors in the home. That's a little confusing to me. And I'm going to tell you, I know that people want to raise their boys to be men, and a lot of times men are expected to be the protectors and providers of their home. I don't know where I fall on that issue, so I'm curious where you fall on.
Yeah, I don't fuck with that. Like, I don't fuck with that. To me, the glaring problem, and this is what makes so much of the discourse hard, right? To me, the least excusable, not least excusable, that's the wrong word. The part of his statement that hasn't been called out enough, I'll say, because people know when they hear those low-key homophobic dog whistles, right? Like those can be pierced out by most people, but I don't think enough people recognize that telling a 15-year-old boy he's the man of the house is very problematic under any circumstance. And that I think Black people specifically, this goes into the Gender Wars video, we try to do this weird balancing act where we want to claim parts of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy for our own, that we think are useful, that we desire, even that we want to perform or have performed for us. And we refuse to, some people refuse to acknowledge that you can't have one without the other. And that if you put a 15-year-old boy in a position to be a man of the house, you are asking him to be a patriarch. You're asking him to invest in patriarchy. You're asking him to resist the emotional wavelength that a 15-year-old boy should have when his father is gone and things get scary at the crib. You're doing so many things. You're opening him up to not recognize when he maybe is getting assaulted by adult women or men because he's just affirming his manhood at 15 with this 30-year-old woman, which is a story that, like, this is experience I've had. Pretty much every Black man I know has lost their virginity through an experience that was actually a sexual assault, and it doesn't get engaged with or talked about because it's contextualized then and now as, oh, I was just getting an early start. That's what a lot of niggas will say. And so, like, that man of the house provision provider stuff is a monkey's paw. You know, it's a double-edged sword. And we suck at talking about it because, again, going back to what I said earlier, dudes will maybe call that out and then twist themselves into a pretzel to make it a woman's problem. Even the issues about sexual assault for men, I see a couple of dudes talk about it from like a holistic standpoint, and then a bunch of dudes be like, see, that's why women yada 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 yada. And it becomes impossible. We end up in the same spot because you can't build a discourse around that. If you're serious about addressing the problem, all you end up doing is reinforcing the problems that are already there. So that,
especially, sorry,
no, that was it.
Especially to your point, when you don't see it as an issue at all, you can only see net positives. Even if you would give credence to certain things that are like, all right, maybe that's harmful, maybe I do want to hear you, but as a net, I see net positives because I raised a strong man. And I feel like, okay, me coming from a position where my dad, or I have one brother, two sisters, and I grew up with my father, who is a very traditionally masculine heterosexual man, right? And so my brother, who's also queer, is also more traditionally masculine. You would absolutely never know, unless he said to you, I am gay, you would never know that he was gay. And so when my dad was giving us these responsibilities, because he didn't, this didn't just start with Anthony Mackie with his child at 15. He said he's been doing this since he was a kid. So I'm imagining a 6-year-old kid, an 8-year-old kid, an 11-year-old kid being told that if somebody breaks into this house, it's not your responsibility.
Fight that grown ass man.
Don't call the cops. It's your responsibility to fuck this grown ass man or men up. And so I think that that's insane when we don't talk enough about sons who may not want to perform. I think that there are certain boys who really do feel a sense of reward, who have been socialized to respond positively to the social rewards of like mommy being like, oh, you're a big boy, and that's good, right? Or dad being like, you know,
that's my little man,
right? And they feel block. And there's a sort of a positive sense of positive reinforcement around that. But we don't talk enough around young men and boys who don't feel that sense of, who don't even get that social, who don't have that response to that kind of conditioning. Because I definitely rejected that. I'm like, first of all, if somebody comes to the house, there's a house phone. And I'll be trying to get to the house phone immediately to dial 911. And everybody, and also it's like, I'm 8. Like, there's nothing I can do at 8 that's gonna stop a 35-year-old, 200-pound man. There's literally nothing I can do. So I think I think we need to talk more about how to raise strong kids. Because obviously, I mean, not obviously, I've been entertaining, and I don't want to say I currently subscribe because I think it'll take much more for me to. No, I subscribe to a genderqueer theoretical framework. In that, like, a lot of people say that gender is not real, that gender is like this myth that we've all, more than just like a social construct, like it's a myth that we believe in deeply. Like it's almost like a faith-based, people are like kind of pious around their approach to gender, in my opinion. And where they hold it, right? In terms of, it's like, this is who we are, this is who we're wired to be, this is who God called you to be,
et cetera, et cetera.
Very dangerous. And I don't know how you undo that in people's minds, because I think there's a real conversation to be had about the importance and the role of a father in the home. But when it's tied into so much, so many things that I would find to be just really dangerous stuff. I don't know how to have that conversation.
It's dangerous. It's self-deluding. It's tiresome.
Exhausting.
I know so many niggas with drinking problems. I know so many grown ass men with drinking problems because they're not happy. Their marriage isn't what it needs to be, and they can't talk to nobody, and they can't say nothing. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, the bot. I'm so happy. I mean, like I'm doing pretty good regardless. I was always slightly off in terms of like my engagement with gender masculinity, so I probably would have never ended up in that position. But I'm also happy I never started drinking because niggas in the bottle is I'm afraid for the livers of so many of my friends.
Drag my father.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. For real.
No,
and it's because like the bottle doesn't judge you. You can tell the bottle every problem. The bottle will intuit how you feel and give you exactly what you need to get by. And like you, like how many of our
uncles, like a true alcoholic?
I mean, because I seen it. I got an uncle who like I saw it with this one uncle for the first time in years in about a month ago, and I said more words to him in about 2 hours than I did my entire life, because every other time I've seen this nigga, he was drunk. and he got 75 kids all over Chicago. You know what I'm saying?
Really?
And it's like Uncle such and such. What you been doing with your whole like? And it's the only uncle. All my uncles, no, not all. Several of my uncles had drinking problems. He's the only one that at least that wasn't even functional with it. Everybody else just drank in the morning and then went to work and then drank at night and went to bed. He was just drunk.
Yeah, there's a difference.
There's a difference.
And other alcoholics will let you know. We are. But okay. Let me, I do want to hone in on the fatherhood piece, right?
Right.
I want to know, because oftentimes when I hear about the importance of a father in the home, it hinges on what I would call like this what did I say I was going to call it? Oh, like this binary.
Hold up. Did you hit 100K? What's up with that plaque in the background? I ain't gave you no love on that. I didn't know you hit 100K, Irby.
Is that yeah, I did.
Man, congrats. I'm sorry. I had to stop that because when you lean to the side, it popped up in my peer view, and I didn't realize. Yeah, you had 100. I wanted to make sure I show love for that because, like Irby, you are a mass Black queer political creator that hit 100K. It's maybe King of Reeds. That's it. And I think I talked to you about this before. And I guess Funky Dineva, right?
Right.
Right. You see what I'm saying? Right. So like I hope if anybody has not given you flowers for the unique line you follow to get to this point, you should be commended for that. I'm sorry to blow smoke for a second. I wanted to give you flowers for that. When I saw that video you did way back when, I was like, oh, I gotta do what I can to make sure my homie succeeds here, and I'm just proud of that. So dope. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that was first of all, who doesn't want to be cut off for flattery? Show me a person. Now, I mean, I definitely really appreciate that. I personally, we've had this conversation before, and I feel like your approach is similar to mine, or like your spirit around this is like, I deserve everything. Actually, I deserve more. Now, I will say, like, monetarily, things have not shown up in a way where it allows me to outsource. So the growth is slower than I'd like for it to be, which is why I started that second channel that we spoke about, where it's like, I want to do the more pop culture stuff because I can do that more easily and it'll bring in more money.
Right.
But I definitely think when I'm looking at my peers who have a similar ideological, like we are in the same demographics, like socially as humans, me personally, them niggas are not seeing me. No, they're not in a couple of different ways. And I don't need to, I mean, shout out to those people doing what they do.
True. Shout out to them.
But it's everything everything they do, I can do, but everything I do, they cannot do. And I think that there's something to be said about that undulation between comedy and real analysis that's very difficult to strike. And about being the same person on and offline. And also, like, everything I talk, this is really how I move. Anyway, shout out to those people. Thank you for
shout out to you. And also, like, even the audience, right? Because the thing that I think your challenge was, you had to convince an audience that they wanted what you were offering, because the audience probably said, I only want key. I only want mess and cattiness. You like, yeah, but what about this analysis though? And it was like, but slowly but surely, you know?
And it's also the number difference, right? Like certain people were like, oh, and it's also the Patreon. Patreon is a huge reason for why I'm able to just like live and pay for shit. And people love, like, I'm going to be very honest with you. People like people who exist or who, when they approach them, they present the way they expect them to present. So when they see an identifiably gay man, they expect me to be kikiing with them. Right. Which I don't have an issue with, right? Because I do like to talk about these things in real life. But there's a lot more depth to what I'd like to talk about as a person, as an intellectual. So let's move on from me.
Yeah. We'll circle back to that some other time. But I'm with you on a lot of that.
Thank you. Now I think that a lot of times when people are talking about the role of a father, it's always this binary of the undulation or the vacillation between punishment and play. When I think about the actual development of human beings, like the educational of the development, the emotional development, even the spiritual work, in my experience and the experience of the people that I'm in community with, all of that labor is almost exclusively had, not even so it's societally put on women, but it's also like just been their experience. Anecdotally, this has been a lot of my experience and my friends' experience. So I'm curious what you think the role of a father is or should be in a healthy family dynamic.
I struggle with this because there's the intersectional feminist me, the postmodernist me, the gender is a construct me, the book learned me that is all about rejecting these frameworks because I know how these frameworks work at their core and what they serve at the end of the day. And then there's the me that lives in my house, and the me that sees that used to be a teacher, that used to be a social worker, that has my family background, and that like knows niggas. and niggas is trying to survive. Folks are trying to like function, and folks have their biases that they are not prepared to just throw away, especially if they've built their life upon them, right? So me personally, right, as a father, my first goal was to raise healthier men than I was raised, and then that I encountered in my work life. You know, I encountered so much dysfunction with boys that my first thinking was, what do I do differently in my home and with my children that eliminates as much of this shit as possible, right? And that means getting rid of some of the things Anthony Mackie seems to be really, positive about. I'm like, not for my boys, right? Getting rid of a lot of that. But then the next thing is, how do I make sure these boys are safe? And that's not explicitly just from a protector role. That's a parent role, period. And so that also means I need to make sure these boys know how to perform Black masculinity adequately for the environment they're in. Because if they don't know how to perform that, they're going to be subject to bullying and ridicule and ostracism. And then I'm opening up a whole other area of concern that I could have avoided. So like, you know what? Hey, boys, let's talk about why we, don't hit girls, and why you make sure you're gracious towards these issues, and like, no, you don't say that, and you don't use gay as a derogatory term. All right. Now let's go to this jujitsu class in case you got a whooping the ass at school. Right. All right. Here, let's do these box jumps so we can improve your athletic capacity. So that when you need to perform masculinity for other people, they see that you're actually capable of doing that, because society requires that of you, regardless of what my politics are. You are going to be beholden to that debt to society, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And so for me, the role of the father is a facilitator in the home, from a masculine perspective, from a masculine standpoint. And that means that where masculinity is going to be useful for the child's development, that's on me as the person that fills that role. And that still sometimes looks way closer to some Anthony Mackie shit than I'm comfortable with, because I'm still with a woman who is brought up in the same binary and has some of the same pressures of motherhood. One thing my father told me, very imperfect man. So I usually just ignore shit. Low key, like a lot of stuff my father said to me, I'm like, all right, Dad, thank you. All right.
Right.
And so one of the things I ignored that I had to circle back to and be like, he might have been onto something, is that my father was like, one of the men's roles in the home is to, if necessary by force, create space between the mother and the boys in terms of like her desire to protect and coddle and like hold on to them. And that goes back to old slave shit, low key, right? And I'm like, Dad, shut up. my wife is read all them books and know all this stuff. And lo and behold, as we start getting to a certain age range, I'm like, baby, let him do it.
Yeah,
let him
that's
do
valuable.
That. Stop. No, and now I got to sneak out and make you touch this bug. You know what I'm saying? When your mama not around. You know what I'm saying? Hey, jump off that high thing, boy, or you're not getting your video game back. And it's like low-key toxic shit. Low-key toxic shit. That I'm like, if I don't do this, my fear is, will my sons develop a lot of insecurities about their ability to function in the world independently? Will they become codependent? Will they be bad partners to the women that come in their lives or the men? I don't know yet, right? To whoever come in their lives, will they be codependent, bad partners that can't do for themselves, that can't whatever? Like, I gotta mix in some stuff to like make sure that they've been in positions that are uncomfortable and challenging and scary, because I don't think that I am not rich enough or wise enough, and the world is not safe enough to guarantee that my sons may not have to know how to choke somebody out. And so
what you was about to say was crazy.
I wasn't about to say that, but it did sound like that.
It did
sound like that.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing is, first of all, definitely what I'm hearing. Is you're actively involved in the social development, as well as this like you being, I mean, you're obviously much more masculine than your wife, right? And the inverse is also true. And so I do think that we do have a responsibility, or I don't want to have kids, but I would imagine it's a really important responsibility to make sure that you're raising just like whole human beings who have access to all forms of social presentation, whether that's code switching, so knowing the difference between like when you're with your friends and when you're in a professional setting, or when you're in a setting where you do need to be perceived as someone who is not to be fucked with. That is important, and that is valuable in a very dangerous world, right? But here's what I think that is a piece that is so often missed. The learning by example, and there doesn't have to be this huge pressure. If you like your dad, you're gonna want to model the things that your dad does. Especially if you are a person who identifies with masculine socialization, which for the vast majority of boys, I'd imagine that that's going to be the form of socialization that they identify with most, right? I did not like my dad. And I didn't like the way that he talked. I thought that he was just a very punitive man. And everything that I did in terms of how I moved always felt like I was a disappointment to him, right? And so I think that for dads who are involved, that's also because my dad was going to work. He's old school, right? My job is to provide, to protect, to discipline.
Don't talk to me when I get home.
And then occasionally there's like, maybe we'll play around, but like that's what I mean by this, just like provider and be like the disciplinarian. And when you're actively involved in the social and emotional development of your kid, I feel like, oh, I know you, I like you, you're cool. I also I like the way when you walk into the room, the way that you're received, the way people respect you, the way people laugh at you, right? These are things that I like. But if I don't like you, all of those things feel like an annoyance, and I don't want to model myself after you. I
think that's I think that's just not the accuracy of how complex kids are, and how you don't know what's coming out that womb. These little motherfuckers be all over. Like, there's no telling where things go. And so, like, my sons, I know, love me to death, but they hate everything I like. And it's funny to them. You know what I'm saying? It's funny to them how much they don't like things. There's a few things obviously meet on, right? But like, they don't do nothing but crack jokes on me liking football. It is the worst thing in the world to them. They don't like, they have low-key called me out. Like, I play some rap music, and daddy, why is he talking about women like that? I'm like, all right, let me turn this off. My bad, y'all. So the modeling.
Not they gathering you.
Right. Daily, these little boys gather me. Daily, you know? And it's humbling, you know what I'm saying? And so like there's times where I know that my modeling is like legit and they're like seeing it, but I also there's a I think Andrewism talked about it, and he's talked about kids a couple times, and he don't got no kids, but it was good shit. Where basically like the real game is, I'm gonna model this, but I'm gonna expect that you pick and choose. And I'm gonna the most I can do beyond that is emphasize things I really think you need to choose or not pick. Whatever, you get my point.
No, yeah.
And so like certain things, you know, like you know, anti-racism, you know, and dealing with white people, you know, I have to encourage. My son got into it with a white boy, some white boys like last semester during soccer, and I didn't like what I heard. I was like, "Oh, you let them say that to you under what? Under what? Like at this school with these people? You?" And I didn't say this, but in my head, I'm like, "Nigga, you let that slide?" And
Right.
so, and I'm like, I know I don't model that, right? So I had to have a direct conversation. Low key, don't let these crackers get away with shit. That's why you in this environment right now. I put you in an environment where you ain't got to take nothing from no crackers. That is the privilege I provided for you. And so a couple of weeks ago, somebody on the soccer field did something out of pocket, and he pushed him over. And I was like, all right, we're gonna try not to be violent, but he pushed you first.
Yeah,
don't let these crackers get away with, you know. So it's like
right.
So it is a complicated mess. And my ultimate, like the goal that I have, I think a lot of millennial parents have when it comes to raising children in general, is I want to give you as little material as possible to talk to your therapist about as it pertains to me. When you start therapy on as an adult, right? And your therapist asks, so what was your relationship like with your dad? My goal is for that to be as short as possible. and I don't know which thing I'm doing is going to be the toxic trait that you pick up on that does that, you know, whatever, and which thing I'm doing is gonna be the thing you hold on to when times get tough, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't know which one of those things is going to be, but my goal is I'm intentionally just trying to like minimize everything as much as possible while gambling on which thing it's going to be. And it's just too complicated to boil down to best practices, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, but
there's
I
so
also,
much more nuanced than that.
Yeah, it's just so much more nuanced and complex than that. Like when people got on me about, I said something about not letting them dye his hair, right? And folks got mad at me in the comments, and it's probably because I left out a part of the explanation. But I still get people that like will like, you know, you get them random hater comments like in 2074, in 2006, in 2024, he said
One time travel.
Right, exactly. Anyway,
I
I'm
think
rambling. Go ahead.
No. We appreciate a ramble because this. I'll just probably like chop this up and put it on the Patreon so we can have more.
Yeah.
But I think more so. I think what you're saying is totally true about like, you know, there's a lot of things that your parents do and you're like, whoa, you're old. That's like not interesting at all. Or I'm just not interested in that because, you know, this is a fear I always have. Like when I have kids, I'm like, what if I don't like my kid? Like, what if my kid's a dick? I don't know. Or my kid doesn't like me.
They can be. It's
but what I'm talking about more so is I feel like the modeling of masculinity for a long time. My dad, you know, your first model of masculinity is your father, and the person you're with the most throughout the formative years of your life is your father. So when you're trying to, if you're not naturally inclined to every traditional gender performance, and you're in a space where it would be beneficial or advantageous for you to perform in a more masculine or traditionally masculine way, the performances that you're probably going to put on are the ones that are most familiar, which are that of your father. And you're either, if you like your dad, then that feels like comfortable. If you don't like your dad, you almost feel an aversion to that performance. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, you know, people will be themselves.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with my father. He was around, right? Like, so I knew where he was at all times, but he just wasn't accessible 90% of the time. And so like I went through life thinking that didn't have much of an effect on me, so to speak. But especially since I've been having to watch myself via YouTube, I'm like, oh, nigga, when did you become your father? You know what I'm saying? And like your mannerisms and like your speaking cadence and, you know, some of your bad habits, you know, being hypercritical, arrogance. Like, so like, you're right in that there's so much. It's like a randomized control group. It's like a placebo effect at the same time. Yeah, that's why I'm like, I put my hands up to God. I'm trying my best.
2 hands to heaven. In the words of Beyonce, 2 hands to heaven. Okay,
right.
I don't want this to be too long. I did have 2 different questions. You can choose to see what you think is most, what you choose to answer. One is around education, like because there's this issue with men graduating and going to college and all the good things. I'm really just curious what your experience was like in school because you did go all the way up to a PhD program. So In that regard, you're not among the men that are the focus of this conversation.
Right.
And I have a pretty positive relationship to academia as a Black male growing up. So I'm curious what that could be about. Like, what do you think is impeding Black or men in general from succeeding in academia?
With Black men, it's the same shit that impedes pretty much everything we do. It's racism, it's access to X, Y, and Z resources, support systems, etc. With Black men specifically the Black man in question here, and I end my video pointing out that one thing that frustrates me about us specifically, quasi-academic thinkers, thought leader types. I made a joke, and it was like, here's a panel discussing why Black men don't go to college, featuring 2 white women and a bunch of niggas that got advanced degrees. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
You know, and that's what it is. And that's what it is. And it's like, and that's why, like, you know, although some of the company I keep among will say the Around the Way brothers, you know, it's not always easy because we don't always agree, because every once in a while they'll say a thing. I'm like, that's real close, nigga. Like, can I pull that out? But I think it's really important that we put more effort into making space and talking directly to and with the people we often make content about, in terms of Black men in the struggle, Black women in the struggle, Black queers in the struggle, etc. Because they ain't read. I got a stack of books that ain't half people ain't read, even with my degrees, right? And it makes me talk different, and it makes me think different, and it doesn't make me right though, right? And it can't replicate the actual lived experience that some of these brothers have. And so I say all that to say, to me, the biggest factor in Black men specifically is that they don't feel very rewarded historically by following that pathway, because that pathway was not shown to them as something that's for you. So me and you, I guarantee, and I had this conversation with a couple of people, like, if you're anything like me, you got identified early by your teachers and administrators and your parents and your family members, like, oh, he's one of the good ones. He's a smart one. Put him in this program. You know what I'm saying? Put him in this, give him this mentor, make sure he's in this class, like all these things, you know, and you got treated with that sense of high regard and expectation early. You internalize it. The people get behind you. Maybe you become a malignant narcissist once you get out of college. Maybe you don't make it because you have a nervous breakdown because everybody putting pressure on you because you got to be positive, brother Hakeem. You know, or 7 times out of 10, you doing good. You doing all right. You get to pick you get to pick your choice of all the eligible Black maidens, and you know, you try not to be too toxic. But I know some of y'all in real life, so I know how that actually works out. Meanwhile, my cousin JJ was a good for nothing by the age of 5, little badass, get in the house. You know what I'm saying?
Now, why is JJ catching a stray?
Because JJ been catching strays his whole life. It's not actually JJ, but you feel me though? You got a cousin, you got a cousin JJ, right? And if you think about it, people have been calling JJ bad since he was old enough to walk. And when JJ tried to embody that academic, professional, high value male stuff throughout life, people were like, you know, or at worst, straight up criminalized him for just being around. You know what I'm saying?
It's crazy. you know, that's crazy.
But it's true though. And I think and I know this from doing work in the education system, from social work, etc., that you see that these lines, you know, and it's not like it's insidious, but it's not like super thought out. You just notice potential and you notice less potential. And Black folks in these communities are like, man, we only got so many resources. You want to give it to FD or you want to give it to JJ? And everybody can be like, oh no, FD, no, give it to him. JJ can be a mechanic and we'll try to keep him out of jail. Yeah. And like that,
or feed him dreams of like being a basketball player.
Exactly. And so when these boys, you know, these boys have the potential to go to school and go to college and be professionals, etc., but the investment in reaching that potential is negative
for most of their lives. And then the flip side is people were like, then they also give them the "you ain't good for nothing, you dusty," stuff, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And like, I think that's often missing from the conversation, because the other part, right, to be real, is there are a lot of dudes doing bad stuff out here. There are a lot of people acting a donkey. There's a lot of abuse and, gaslighting and homosexuals and, like all kinds of like bad stuff that men are doing because they get
hold on. I didn't know where to place that comma. You said it's a lot of abuse, gaslighting, homosexuals. I was like, oh, gaslighting homosexuals.
No.
Got it.
Homosexuals.
Because I'm like,
I did say homo. I did say homo first, but it's supposed to be hobo. You know what a homosexual is, right?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I've heard that before.
I'm talking about, like, again, my cousin JJ in real life, good looking dude, intelligent enough, not a ton going for him, but if you want someone to play the male role in your life, he got that for you, and for her, and for her. and so that's a problem.
For the streets.
And so it's hard. It's for the community dick is another term I've heard used. And so when someone comes to JJ about being a homosexual and community dick, he catches hell. And then those same people be like, why you ain't go to college though? And it's like, from his perspective, it's like, do y'all really even care for real? Do y'all really care? Like, I don't feel like we have that type of relationship where you ask me this question. And it's a hard problem to really break through. It's complicated. It's a complicated mess. That's why I'm making a video about Beyonce next. I'm avoiding this shit for at least the next 6 months.
She's a complicated mess though, so it's like, where's the real escape? But I mean, beautiful complicated mess, and there's fun stuff to talk about there. Okay, this is a great conversation. This was super, super good. I think this gave me so much more. It adds a lot more. I thought that my laptop died because it froze for a second. I got scared. But no. This was an incredible conversation. Thank you so much. They're always incredible. Hopefully I'm in the Beyonce video. If I'm not, fuck it.
It's leaning towards, like, talking to you just now, and like when we were saying earlier, I'm realizing I can get I don't know. Do I have a 15-minute Kendrick Lamar rant in that bad boy that helps create some bridges to either make this 2 videos, which means I keep both you and Ismatu in it, or one long video that I think can be healthier in the algorithm, because people click on anything related to Kendrick Lamar right now.
This is very true.
And so, like, Kendrick Lamar Beyonce combination during concert season, that's just like sounds like a win. But I don't know if I feel like rewriting that much. Oh, and check out lead notes in the joint when you get a chance.
Yes. I'm gonna do that when we get. Let me end this here. All right, bye y'all. Thank y'all for watching this. I don't know what to say. I'll talk to y'all later. Let me do this. Okay. This